Let's go live to Christian Datoc, White House correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Welcome to the program. We've just seen the British Prime Minister say that the 20 years wasn't in vain. Watching that story and watching the news unfold, it's pretty hard to mount an argument to support that.
Well, President Joe Biden has maintained that the reason we were in Afghanistan in the first place was to launch a base of operations to find and kill Osama bin Laden in retaliation for the September 11th terror attacks. In that regard, the mission was a success. That being said, there's no reason to have stayed in an additional decade in a country that clearly doesn't want foreign intervention there. And I think at least polling in the United States shows that the president's plan for withdrawal is incredibly popular. Obviously, the people of Afghanistan feel slightly different at this time.
Yeah, well, it's just escalated at such a rate. I wouldn't even think that the politicians in the United States or here or the UK could have ever thought that it would move this quickly.
Certainly not. We were speaking with some of the officials from the Trump administration who were part of the transition to the Biden team this past January, and they thought that Kabul, should we pull out all of our troops, would be in danger of falling perhaps in 2 years. Obviously, this is an incredibly expedited pace. And currently, John Kirby, he's the chief spokesman over at the Pentagon, told us today that Kabul is not in immediate danger of falling. That being said, 2 weeks ago, no one thought all of these provincial capitals, no one thought the second or the third largest city in the country would be in danger of being taken over by the Taliban. Yet here we are today. So obviously, the plight of the Afghan people is incredibly dire at this point in time, and hopefully the situation does not result in even more violence, although it is certainly trending that way.
Absolutely, Christian. Now, looking domestically in the United States at the COVID situation, numbers are escalating. It's continuing to be labelled and stamped as a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
That label certainly still stands, but we are getting some good news. Thursday, 918,000 people were vaccinated in the United States. That's the highest single total that we've had in months at this point in time. But look, the big two states, Texas and Florida, two of the most populous states in the country, are really driving this surge in hospitalizations, the surge in serious cases. And though we haven't seen quite the same uptick in deaths, the majority of deaths occurring in the country are in those two states as well. So there really is sort of a bifurcated population at this point in time. Those who are vaccinated or at least have gotten their first jabs, and those who remain resistant to getting the vaccine.
The vaccine rollout here in Australia was a shambles for quite a number of months. It's finally starting to pick up. And one of the reasons why it's picking up is, one, availability, but two, is that people are now starting to see this as very, very real. And I suppose that is mirrored in the US.
Well, I think in the US, it's not so much that it's now being looked at as real. It's being looked at as this isn't going anywhere anytime soon unless the majority of the population does their part, does what they need to do to prevent the virus, mutating into a different strain, mutating into a variant that perhaps is vaccine resistant. So no one wants to do 2 or 3 years of coronavirus semi-lockdowns. Obviously, this is a far cry from the hard economic lockdowns we had of 2020. But seriously, people are trying to just live their normal lives at this point in time. And I hope sooner than later we can get the majority of the population, both here in the US and across the international community, at least partially vaccinated, because these are scary times and no one wants to go back to the dark days of 2020 by any means.
Oh, absolutely. And I suppose what I was alluding to there, Christian, with feeling it's real, is that basically we've seen lots of news stories coming out. We saw that doctor in Alabama, how this Delta variant is attacking younger people. The first wave of coronavirus in much of 2020, the morbidity was not solely with the elderly, but significantly. People now, younger people, are starting to see that they aren't immune to this.
Certainly, Tim, and the Delta variant, I think, is, while not as deadly as the quote-unquote wild strain that we dealt with in 2020, it's a lot more transmissible, and it is impacting young people. And as schools reopen this coming fall, the CDC has already recommended that everyone attending class or working on campuses, whether they are students or staff, need to wear a mask. You're seeing a lot of institutions at the collegiate level mandating vaccines for people to come back in the fall. And, obviously the elderly population, they were targeted first off because they were the most at risk. The majority of them have been vaccinated at this point. I think the percentage is somewhere encroaching on 80% at this point in time. Yet as the vaccines get approved for children as young as 12 and perhaps even younger heading into the fall before classes start, that's the president's aim, is to make sure everyone in the country is vaccinated, because this virus doesn't discriminate. It doesn't only attack the elderly. It doesn't only attack the immunocompromised. Everyone is at risk unless you're vaccinated at this point in time.
Absolutely, and it's great to see the positive news with the uptick in vaccinations in the United States. And it's just a no-brainer, isn't it? I know we're stating just very simple facts here, that we're very fortunate now, in contrast to the early days of 2020, because there are vaccines available. There is medication now to get us through collectively around the world through this problem.
Certainly, it's not just vaccines. There are therapeutics like Regeneron. There's just the zinc prescription diet that people who have low or moderate cases of the virus can take. And I think if you look back at what we know now in 2021, 8 months into 2021 compared to 8 months into 2020, we have so much more knowledge. And I think that is why the administration is a little frustrated that there is still this large sample of the population here in the U.S. who is so hesitant to get vaccinated. And unfortunately, the real reason behind that is not necessarily public health policy, it's politics. And the two governors of the states that I mentioned earlier, Texas and Florida, Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott, are both possible presidential candidates down the line. So hopefully they put their careers to the side and start worrying about the health of their own constituents before running, before it's even the end of 2021.
Yeah, absolutely, Christian. It's where priority should be, isn't it? And just very, very quickly, I know we're done for time, but it still is running along party lines in a lot of ways, isn't it? The whole vaccination thing.
It certainly is. We have polling coming out just about every day or every 2 days here in the U.S., and the majority of the vaccine hesitant population are Republican. They are from the South. They do say they support former President Donald Trump, which is interesting because the Trump administration, let's not forget, was the administration that developed these 3 vaccines that are available here in the United States. So hopefully something will change sooner than later. But this, as it stands out, like you said, a pandemic of the unvaccinated, a pandemic of unvaccinated Republicans. You want to take that a step deeper.
Yeah, well, one thing we will take out of this, we'll take the positive out of it, Christian, and we'll say that the step up in vaccinations is a good thing, and it's starting to move here as well. So hopefully in a few months' time when we talk, we'll be in a lot more positive space. Great to chat.